Ex-homeless or anyone in the know, what advice or help would you give to someone about to become homeless? Zgostik said. Do whatever you can to not be homeless. Put pride aside and hit up friends and family. Even if you can't stay with them, they might know someone. Find local resources. There are probably several organizations near you. Once you've been living on the street for a certain amount of time, people will be less likely to offer help. Keeping Track said. This. Churches. Mental health. Hospitals. Charities. Non-profits. Old friends. Borderline strangers. Live-in jobs with board. Hostels. I was homeless for over a month, the first week sleeping on a mountain in winter with no gear. Bandit 6 Actual said. Yeah, I feel this. I was homeless as a teenager in the 80s and nights are cold in the mountains even in summer. I'm in my 50s now with a decent job and my girlfriend says my constant fear of homelessness makes her sad. I maintain an RV even though I don't like camping. I wonder why. It's my hedge to make sure I never have to sleep outside again. Come back Little Raven said. I hear you. I grew up poor but not homeless poor. It's a good thing we have a garden to feed us poor. As I age I find that I keep stacking my deck in a way that I can handle catastrophic financial loss. An obscenely stocked pantry full of non-perishables. A car that is big enough for me, my husband, and the dogs to sleep in. A tiny home in a swamp that has a total monthly cost of around $400, after paying it off in another 2.5 years that will drop to $150 a month. After I pay that off I'm considering getting a tiny camper. I could work at a McDonald's and pay the bills there easily. My husband grew up with money and doesn't think any of this is necessary, but I don't sleep as well at night without it. I also have one of the most stable jobs on the planet, making it even less likely necessary. Ada, I'm a college chemistry professor. Do you still get a sinking pit in your stomach when something major in the house breaks or if your car breaks down? Like, thinking of how you could possibly afford to pay the bill? It's awful what childhood poverty does to our brains even as adults. Mutnik said. This hits me. I wasn't homeless but borderline trying to make ends meet during the 2008 downturn. I'm married now and we're financially secure but I still calculate how far we can go if we both lose our jobs. Also my car is 20 years old and leaking oil but I just can't justify getting a new car even though we can afford it. Also when something breaks in the house I try to fix it myself. And if we have to call someone I ask them to show me how to fix it so I don't need to call someone next time. I'm not cheap, I just really get stressed out over spending money. Edit. And now with a child my motivation is to save more so she doesn't have to experience that stress. Engineering Kids said. It's a weird psychology aspect. I came from a poor background. My wife's parents literally grew up third world without running water. So we struggled and hustled hard in our youth. And even now at almost 40, we still get a bit of anxiety about spending money. I don't mean to brag or boast, but I'm top 2-5% in wealth now, with a couple of single-family detached homes and apartment buildings as rentals in a high cost of living area, and only recently got rid of my rusty 1997 Honda CR-V. I still wear one pair of shoes at a time until they are worn out. I have about 20 pairs of shoes I've never worn because I'm saving them for a special occasion later. Lockdown Lockout said. Please don't save stuff for a special occasion. I threw out so much unused special stuff when packing up my aunt's home. It was so sad to be putting things in bags for Goodwill knowing she'd never had the pleasure of them herself. Also when we brought her things we wanted her to enjoy them, not put them away for best. Nothing wrong with being careful, it's a valuable life skill but life is for living. Osama Roy said. If it's leaking oil, just keep it topped off, try to buy some Lucas or other stop leak type oil. After that it'll probably be a gasket issue, especially since it's 20 years old. That turns into $100 near $1,000 repair if that's the only issue on the car. I'd say get it repaired. You're not gonna be able to do it yourself if you need it on a daily basis and only have household tools. If it's got suspension issues, transmission issues, dead battery alternator, just a ton of little things wrong with it, I'd suggest scraping it and getting something newer. It'll cost less in the long run and less of a headache. Cat Nine Tail said. Holy cow, you're describing my feelings exactly. I didn't grow up poor, but my first few years out of school I married an abuser and he cut me off from working. I finally went back to work after our child was born, and I saved enough to leave the marriage and take my child with me, but even now with the home nearly paid off and 3 good jobs, 1 main, 2 side, I constantly wonder when it will collapse. I'm reading the advice in this thread very carefully. I think I have a lot of trauma I need to deal with. Chief Jenga said. It's been theorized multiple times that family poverty, especially generational poverty, adversely affect the development of those who experience it. Sometimes trauma doesn't mean the thing that happened to me once. Sometimes it means experiencing toxic stress for an extended period of time, especially during brain development. Bandit 6 Actual said. I do too. I always have a truck instead of car even though it's more expensive because they last longer, are made better, and parts availability is measured in decades. My current one could literally last the rest of my life. That was my thought when I bought it outright. If I lose everything, I won't lose a dry place to sleep. My girlfriend thinks she grew up poor, but her family's homes were all paid off before she was born and she basically grew up with the habits passed down from grandparents who survived the Great Depression. 1 slice of lunch meat or cheese on a sandwich is a luxury. Peanut butter and jelly is the go-to. Hoard everything. But she always had peanut butter and jelly. She never stood in line for Gov cheese in her life. My mom banked on our 1/8 Cherokee heritage for government assistance or we would have starved. SRA HTL Go FXTRT said. I always have a truck instead of car even though it's more expensive because they last longer, are made better, and parts availability is measured in decades. This has not been the case since around 2008, just as a heads up. EPA mandated passenger truck emission systems starting in 2009 in terms of reliability, and they're very, very expensive to fix. Modern Chevy and GMC diesels require the tech to unbolt and lift off the entire cab of the truck for certain fixes in the emission system, and you have to pull the engine and transmission for similar services in Dodges. And the best part is the truck goes into limp mode until those services are performed. So be aware late model turbo diesel trucks are time and money pits when they break. Cabber 2 said. I own a van built out for van dwelling for this same reason. I am extremely conservative financially, and am loath to go into any debt. I keep a large emergency fund in a savings account, and a substantial amount of cash on hand. I hitchhiked and rode freight trains in my youth, so I know very well how to survive on $0, but the number of formerly middle-class homeless people on the streets of U.S. cities is shocking. Don't think for 1 second that homelessness cannot happen to you. It absolutely can, and the speed with which your life can collapse is terrifying. Most people are about 3 paychecks from living on the street and eating at rescue missions. When I was on the road I met many homeless veterans, college graduates, former professionals, including a dentist, an attorney and 2 nurses, and so on. Normal life is balanced on the razor's edge. It doesn't take much to upend your life, a serious illness, a car wreck, a divorce. I met many men rendered homeless by divorce, a loss of your job, a criminal conviction, drunk driving, etc. Plan for disaster. Every person should own the basics of hobo life, a durable backpack, a sleeping bag, a good pair of hiking boots, warm winter clothing and cookie. 99% of the people reading this are thinking, that's ridiculous. I could never become homeless. Think again. You absolutely could. Spark 2424 said. If you do need to be around businesses, as long as you aren't harassing customers and panhandling, it's more likely the MGRS will leave you be and not call the cops. When I was in retail I would often share my lunch with the guy who was homeless. It turned out to be a good trade-off too. He knew our vehicles and was a deterrent to thieves. And take him plates when we had pizza or sandwich days. Bippy the Fool said. I ended up driving around to churches in the area. I went inside and asked if they would be okay with me staying in their back parking lot at night. I was lucky that the first church I stumbled upon was more than happy to let me use it. They gave me tips on the shady places to park. They also said they would let an officer know I had their permission to stay there. I never got harassed while I stayed in their parking lot. Your Bubble Stink said. Also feel proud and confident when you go to access their services. They're there exactly because they want to help people like you. There are resources available for situations like yours. Find a social worker. John PC 2020 said. I've had to explain to a few people, some of us went through rough times and took all the helps we could get. We stood in the lines for food stamps, and for the government surplus foods that had cheese, peanut butter the consistency of epoxy, oatmeal, flour and cornmeal, whatever we could get. Education grants too. Now we don't mind paying taxes that go to the next ones that need it. Don't be embarrassed, but also don't get comfortable with it. Get the hand up, the leg up, and get out. Get back to a fully productive life as soon as you can, but just do the best you can wherever you are. Geronimo said. Yeah. I was homeless for a long time. Mental health was the reason. I guess I repeat what others said and do what you can to avoid it. There are literally people out there who will beat the shit out of you for being homeless because they prey on the weak. Trust me, it happened to me. But if it's unavoidable, make sure you have a food stamp card. I didn't, and I'd say that would make things a lot easier. I guess this is dumb advice, but if you can sleep in a cart, it would be 1 billion times better. The first bit, going to sleep thinking some might attack you in your sleep, is a really bad feeling. It also came true as someone woke me up putting a gun to my head. I'll never forget how they cackled and laughed as they walked away. That was the one night I left my head out of my blanket, as I normally wrapped up under the blanket like a burrito. I don't think that was a coincidence, as I don't look very intimidating, and as I said, people will prey on the weak. Different guy. I'd say try to hide yourself while you sleep. One thing I had that helped was a winter hat. I would unroll it over my face on cold nights. I recommend having gloves too, but I use socks instead. If you find a good place, just stick with it. I went to a new spot after I got the gun pointed to my head, and cops arrested me for sleeping in the park. They also kicked my ass too. Geronimo said. Another huge thing for me was finding a big backpack. I found it in a parking lot and wish I still had it as a memento of a time I'll never repeat. So bring a backpack. One homeless guy had a laptop, and I'd see him at Starbucks and McDonald's using it. Was kinda jealous. But you might get robbed for it, so it's a double-edged sword. Anyways, my backpack got taken by the cops one time. And yeah, if you're sensing a theme, the cops will harass you. There is a war on the poor in this country, us at least. If there is a pizza shop that sells slices of pizza, go in as they're closing, and if they're cool, they'll give you free pizza. Try to be polite with them and you may get a report, and they'll give you free drinks and stuff too. But if I could have, I would have tried to get mental help and avoided it all. If you go to a hospital and tell them you're homeless with mental health problems, you'll at least get to bed for 72 hours and some decent meals. They may also set you up with a halfway house or something if you have nowhere to go. Or they may give you addresses to soup kitchens at least. Some shelters have showers too. If you can get one, go for it, as people will complain you smell bad and kick you of places where you're escaping the cold or heat. Happened to me. Also keep napkins on you, as you will have to shit during the night when nowhere is open. It will bring tears to your eyes. That's it, come to this. Geronimo said. Also be careful of other homeless people in shelters. A lot of them have mental health problems in it. Now I hate to say it, as most mental health people aren't violent, but I got threatened there. Even though I didn't say anything or was violent. I'm no longer homeless and got on disability, which pays my rent now. If these things don't sound good to you, do whatever you can to avoid it. Also, I'd say try to stay in a good area if you can. Less lowlifes and people give you more money for food. Speaking of which, avoid drugs and alcohol, as it will only make things worse. I was almost always sober, but when I wasn't, I got really depressed and would walk into oncoming traffic, or once tried to hang myself. It's not a good life like that. If you want to talk, you can hit me up, DM or open. Fiber Pirate said. If you're given a place to sleep, a couch, a room, something, do it or to help out. One shower a day could be the difference between you having a roof over your head and being kicked out. It could even result in some spending money. Source. My life. 4 places took me in when I was a young adult. One place demanded a chore I had no experience or skill in, and that was a miserable failure, but I had a place to live for the better part of 4 months while I did it. The second place had a pile of dishes that hadn't been done in so long that it was a science experiment. One of my roommates from there caught up with me years later, and they couldn't figure out who did the dishes, but everyone else in the house was thankful for it. Other roommates from that time have also met up with me and thanked me. A third place, I did the cooking and cleaning for the month or so I was there. The last place, I did all the chores the guys didn't want to do, grocery shopped, cooked the most, and did the most dishes. 2 of the guys even asked me to do their laundry, and I got handed money for it, and it meant I could do my own too at the laundromat. There was another place, But when the person running it suggested that the women living there engage in prostitution, I got out of there as quick as I could. Rollover Beethoven 93 said, "It's also crucial to have an address, phone number and internet access while you're on the hunt for a more permanent home. Employers need to reach you. You can't get government assistance without a house. You need to go online to find out what you qualify for and what jobs are available. You need somewhere to shower and wash your clothes. Once you're homeless, your problems really compound." 24-Hour 8 said, "It's not necessarily that you are disentitled to it, but in order to obtain and keep assistance, very often you need things like a permanent address and reliable phone number and/or internet access. This is particularly true with the pandemic because government offices that allow for in-person applications in other places with internet access, ex-libraries, may be closed or severely restricted in your area. Let me walk you through unemployment in my country. In order to get it, the application is online. So, if you don't have a computer and internet access, you must either go somewhere with public access, that is library, or go to the government office and wait to use one. Also worth pointing out that the application is purposefully confusing and difficult, so you're probably going to need help. So if you don't want to wait ages in phone holding hell, you'll want to go to the building and just have someone there to ask for help. Of course, they do ask for an address and your contact info, and there are consequences if it isn't reliable. Let's say that you get approved. Well, you're going to have to file bi-weekly reports to prove you've been looking for work and to declare any income, should you manage to find work before the end of your benefits. And that's going to require that you either have access to a computer and internet connection or phone regularly. You also may be sent information by mail that requires you to do things like attend an information session. And there could be similar notices posted to your online account. If you fail to comply with any requirements, your benefits may be cut off. 24-Hour 8 said, "And with the pandemic, something important to consider is that many government offices and libraries have been closed. And because demand for government programs has gone up, and the government has done nothing to increase capacity, it was, and probably still is, pretty much impossible to use the phone system. So all of the above is many times worse. I had to apply for unemployment before the pandemic, fucking awful timing, and I'm still out of work because the economy is bad and I had no job to go back to, because I was laid off and it was hard. There were questions on the form that seemed purposefully ambiguous and confusing, designed to ensure that you made a mistake and got denied, and of course the government website was no help at all. I can't imagine trying to navigate the system without having internet access or being able to ask for help." Fensai Angelrit said, "Exactly what I was thinking. I still remember the time I tried to do the thing online but it wouldn't work, so I went into the office to talk to a person. They insisted I do it online even though I told them it wouldn't work. There was a screen I couldn't get past. They apparently thought I was just dumb as dog shit, so I went and entered my details until I got to the troublesome screen, and went and got the concierge. They didn't know what to do, so they got a person who had been dismissive of my request for help, and she was like, 'Oh, that shouldn't happen.' Yeah, no shit, Sherlock. Such an annoying system. It's all fabulous and efficient until it isn't." User number 314 said, "Yes. My uncle let us live in his oversized shed in the backyard. It had electricity and was well insulated. We had to go inside for the bathroom, but that sure beat having to give up our cats and figure out how to live in our car. Eventually we got everything back on track and it was so much easier just because I had an address." Brugard said, "Live in your car, but don't hang out in your car. Work, school, gym, hang out with friends, whatever. Have a gym membership for showering. Get a private mailbox at a Kinko's or Postnet or whatever for your address, so it looks like an apartment instead of a P.O. box. Costs about $15 a month. Get a sleeping bag that is designed for outdoor camping. Mine would keep you warm even in -40 degrees. Don't worry about other people noticing or freaking out. From time to time a cop might knock on your car window and ask you to park somewhere else. Be polite, compliant, etc., but generally speaking other people will demonstrate over and over again these three things. They don't notice. They don't question. They don't care." Uniquenamif User 1 said, "The gym membership is huge. Might even be the #1 thing I'd recommend. $10 gym membership gives you access to a place to clean up and change clothes every day. Northern Punk said. Yo bro, I spent 10 years homeless. I don't even know where to begin, but I have finally got my shit together after a long time on the streets. If you need any advice at all, feel free to PM me. Biggest advice right off the bat is to figure out where you can wash yourself, get a shower, and get food from food banks, hampers. Churches give out free meals, and also you'll have to learn how to dumpster dive at food markets and bakeries to find semi-expired food that's still edible. Bakeries will throw out the day-olds and basically pastries and other things that they can't sell. I have eaten my body weight tenfold from bakery dumpsters. But for real man, if you need any advice, feel free to ask. Another important thing is socks. Always change your damn socks. Take care of your feet. Feet are #1 priority. Get yourself some Gold Bond powder too. That shit will save your life when you have gone a long time without a shower and all your crevasses start to get rotten. LOL. 100% get socks and Gold Bond. Charlie Tant played it said. Hi. Social worker Ines here, formerly in housing services. My advice is that you find your local housing services organization ASAP. Oftentimes they can pay back rent deposits, utility bills, etc., place someone in immediate shelter, and offer other resources for people who are at risk of becoming homeless as well as people who are already without shelter. Whatever you do, don't wait. Paperwork moves slowly and bureaucracy is complicated, but these services exist because housing is a struggle for millions, maybe billions, of people across the world. You're not alone. As someone who has been homeless thrice, I can attest that any person can become homeless. Good luck, stay safe. Find your local nonprofits.